Now can you hear me? Yeah. Well, welcome and happy 384th anniversary of the state of Maryland. And all of us sitting here right now, let's pledge that when we're celebrating the 385th anniversary of the state of Maryland, that one of our eminently qualified Democrats will be in the State House. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize some dignitaries that we have in the audience. First of all, I'd like to recognize the president of Hood College, Andrea Chapdelaine, who has been the president and Hood College have been amazingly hospitable to us, and we can't thank them enough for their generosity and their hospitality. So thank you, President Chapdelaine. I'd also like to recognize Senator Ron Young. Delegate Karen Lewis Young. County Executive Jan Gardner. I guess we know how this crowd feels. And City Alderman Donna Kuzemchak. If I missed anybody, I apologize. You know, Larry Hogan talks about bringing change to Maryland, but all that he's really done is shortchange the citizens of this great state. It's time for a change, but it's a change that will come with the election of any one of our 7 candidates for governor. And we need to make sure that we get out and we support our nominee, whoever that may be. And you'll have a chance this afternoon to listen to them and hear what they have to say about some of the critical issues facing our state and Western Maryland. We have an embarrassment of riches, actually. All 7 of our candidates, 6 of whom are here today, Rashern Baker unfortunately could not make it, that all 7 of them would serve the citizens of this state well in Annapolis. They will have our backs and will provide strong leadership, moving us forward in the area of education, healthcare, the environment, human rights, and even agriculture. One of the 7 will lead the Democratic wave in November. No, it's not a wave, it's a blue tsunami, and we are ready to take that. We in Frederick County and West are going to start being recognized as blue parts of the state of Maryland. We have to make sure that never again will happen what happened in 2014 when so many Democrats stayed home. Never again will we sit back and let 23% of the electorate decide who's going to govern our state. It's up to us, people in this room, to work for victory in November and to work for the ticket. It's important, most important, that we vote. You know, one indicator in which Larry Hogan does have considerably better grade than any of our candidates, he proudly brandishes his A rating with the NRA. We can't say that about any of our candidates waiting in the green room right now. I, as many of you, attended yesterday's phenomenal rally in Washington. It was incredible. It was emotional, and it was a hopeful experience. I had been losing faith, as I'm sure many of you have. Every day seemed more depressing than the day before, and worrying about the world that we were leaving for our children and our grandchildren. But you know what? Yesterday gave me faith. Our kids have this. And they've got to get out there and get ready to work not only for gun legislation, but for ensuring the continuation of our democracy. I am humbled, but I'm also reassured by what I saw yesterday. But marching and rallying isn't enough. We've got to get these young people out to vote. And that is one of our most important things that we can do between now and November, is get out the vote. You know, 5 million new voters turn 18 every year. We've got to make sure that we get them registered. Actually, right here today, if you turn around, you can see a huge sign that says register to vote here. We're here with voter registrations in the back. Register, change your affiliation, change your address. Remember that as an unaffiliated voter, you will not be able to vote in the primary. You'll not be able to select one of the Democratic candidates that you'll be listening to this afternoon. By the way, another great option for students is the absentee ballot. County Councilman Jerry Donald won his race by 25 votes 4 years ago, and only after the last absentee ballot was counted. You see, his former students at Middletown High School mounted an absentee ballot campaign that took him over the top. So we need to do that same thing to encourage students, if they're not going to be at the election site, to come and vote absentee. Finally, I'd like to introduce some of the people that made this afternoon's events possible. And when I call your name, if you would just stand, I would appreciate it, because there are so many. First of all of the members of our Central Committee, if you would please stand to be recognized. They all have jobs, so if they're not in here, they're someplace else working. United Democrats of Frederick County, our president is Mark Jafari. He's way up on top there. Laura Westorp. She's not here. Bonnie Nicholson, if you're here. And the Young Democrats of Frederick County, Gayon Sampson. And a special shout out to the Hood College Democrats and their president, Hannah Kristen. She is the moderator for this afternoon's performance. I guess that's what we call it. And also, finally, I'd like to recognize the impetus for today's gathering, and that's the United for Maryland organization. This is a grassroots organization working to elect a strong Democratic governor in 2018. Its president is Betsy Halsey, which I believe she's still outside. And Christina Ginsburg, who is sitting back here, she's going to make sure that the questions are all appropriate and answered. United for Maryland wants to empower you to help move Hogan out and move Maryland forward. But they need your help to make this happen. It costs money to put on an afternoon like this. And United for Maryland needs your help to make sure that other events such as this can occur across the state, and that they have funds to mount an aggressive Get Out the Vote campaign later in the year. So if you please, they have a table set up outside after the interviews. If you would consider giving them a contribution, it would be most helpful. One of the young leaders of United for Maryland is Danny Delgado. She was spurned into activism after the 2016 elections. She joined a Gaithersburg huddle following the Women's March in 2017 and co-founded the Gaithersburg chapter of Drinking Liberally. She's been a leader on Democrats for Maryland Executive Board since its inception in the spring of 2017. Please join me in welcoming Danny Delgado.
Thank you, Myrna. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, taking a step towards making Maryland bluer than it already is. On November 9th, we all felt a mix of despair and disappointment, a lot of anger. I personally grieved for the future that we would never know and feared for the direction we were starting to take. But I took comfort in knowing that I live in bright blue Maryland. I took comfort in the certainty that I live in a state that would keep me safe and sane through the Trump administration, a state that does not buy into the Trump mentality. And for the first time in my life, I really learned the power of state government. As I saw the governors of New York and California, North Carolina and Virginia, even Alaska, stand up to Trump, make a statement, and really stand up for the values of their states. And I turned around and I looked for my governor. I looked to see what he was ready to say. Nothing. Crickets was all we heard from Hogan for several months after the elections. Larry Hogan did not have a single word of comfort or reassurance for Marylanders. When funding for our state was threatened, he had nothing to say. While we marched and petitioned and called, he had nothing to say. Larry Hogan did nothing more than stand in the way of our legislators as they tried to make the progress that he couldn't. I realized then that what we often hear about Hogan not being so bad is not only a complacent statement to make, it's 100% wrong. And we deserve better. Maryland deserves better. Maryland deserves a governor with the courage and integrity to stand up to anyone for our state's well-being, for the good of our state, of our economies. And that is not Larry Hogan. It never has been. We deserve a governor who won't just pretend to understand our struggling economies, but will actually do something about it, take action to revive them. At United for Maryland, our mission is to empower each and every one of you to choose a strong Democrat to take on Larry Hogan this November. It's our mission to support the chosen nominee after the June primaries to make sure our governor is once again someone who represents Maryland's values and needs. Together, we must elect a governor who deserves the honor of leading our remarkable state, a state that has always stayed ahead of the curve on economic change, technology, medicine, a state that was at the forefront of the farm-to-table action. We deserve a governor that will actually stand up for what we believe in. And we deserve a governor who deserves our state. We are all united for Maryland, and together we will get this done. I believe personally that Frederick and Western Maryland are our secret weapon and have been for a long time. And United for Maryland will help us all get there. And if I can just take your attention over to the screen, I'd like you to see just a little video about what we're all about.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 1, 0, and lift off.
It's not too late, free from hate. Think of the future that we could create. Face the facts today. There's a better way. Take one step back and say there's a better way. Like a tree.
keeping exit ways free just in case of an emergency. Bathrooms are going to be towards the back and on the sides. You're going to go down the stairs. The ladies' room is going to be on the right side, my right. And the men's room is going to be on this side here. You were also handed ballots on your way in. These are really important. They really give us an idea of where our election is going. Please be sure to fill them out. There are 2 columns for you to fill out. There is a pre-column that's for you to fill up right now as you're looking at me. Mark down your selection for who you would vote for right now, or if you're undecided. Then after the forum, after you've heard what the candidates have to say, please mark on the post column what your selection is at that point. The results will be on our Facebook page in a few days. And now it is my pleasure to introduce a very impressive young woman, our moderator for today. Hannah Kristen is a double major in political science and global studies with a concentration in global governance and conflict. She's the co-founder and president of Hood College Democrats, the president of the class of 2018, head delegate of the Model UN, and in her time at Hood College, she has held 6 internships, including her current internship with Congressman Jamie Raskin. Please help me welcome Hannah.
Thank you, Danny, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming. Candidates, it is my greatest pleasure to welcome you here today. And I will start by bringing our candidates out, starting with Mr. Rich Madaleno. Mr. Jim Shea. Ms. Krish Vignarajah. Mr. Alec Ross. Mr. Kamenetz. And Mr. Vignarajah. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for an opening statement. Then I will ask a handful of questions, each generally directed to 3 candidates at a time. We'll have 1 question, which all of the candidates will answer. You will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and you will have 3 minutes for a closing statement. There are 3 timekeepers up here in the front row to keep the pace of time and spend on each answer. And there's a minute left. And when there's a minute left on your speaking time, the timekeeper will hold up the card that says 1 minute. And when there's 15 seconds left, they will hold up the orange 15-second card. And when your time is up, the pink stop card. In the interest of time and fairness, if you continue to speaking at the stop card, I will say thank you, and we will move on to the next candidate. Hood College Television is providing live coverage. Follow them on Facebook to review this tape later. And I encourage all of the candidates and voters to keep the conversation going from today on. Today's forum is only a subset of issues that are important across Maryland. So audience, hi.
Hi.
Please silence your cell phones and beeping watches now. If you need to speak, please take the conversation outside. And we request that you treat all of our candidates respectfully and refrain from clapping, cheering, calling out for any specific candidate, with the exception that after closing statements, you can clap for all of our candidates here today. So our coalition partners for our event today, developed the questions that will be asked. There will be no questions from the floor. However, there are 2 opportunities for you to ask questions. After the forum, at the candidate meet and greet, and by writing a question on the back of your ballot and submitting it to one of the volunteers that will be waiting at the doors to collect them. Or you could interact with the United for Maryland Facebook page. These questions are all going to be considered for future forums. So the candidates have been informed of the following format. Each candidate will receive the same number of questions. If any candidate wants to respond to a question that she or he was not asked, the candidates are invited to write a short reply, which will be posted on the United for Maryland Facebook page. Now we will invite our candidates to make their opening statements, starting with Mr. Madaleno. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you all for coming out, and thank you, Frederick County, for showing us the way with that huge victory in the city elections this year. And I know many of you had a big role in making that happen, but you helped change the narrative, and you helped demonstrate to the people of Maryland that when Democrats vote, we cannot lose, whether in Frederick City, Frederick County, or around the state of Maryland. And that's what you're going to see come November. Democrats are going to show up, and we are going to win big across the state of Maryland. My name is Rich Madaleno. I have the honor of being a state senator from Montgomery County. Been in the Senate for 12 years, and then 4 years prior to that in the House of Delegates. I'm joined in my ticket by LaWanda Jenkins. LaWanda was a secretary in the O'Malley administration and has 17 years of executive branch experience. With the Madaleno Jenkins team, you have a ticket of unparalleled experience at the state level who is ready to move our state forward. Thank you, and I look forward to answering all of your questions.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Shea. You have 1 minute.
Hi, I'm Jim Shea. Thank you for having me here. Great county of Frederick, led by a great county executive, Jan. Good work, keep it up. I'm a lifelong Marylander. My mother was a guidance counselor in the public school system. My father a salesman. My wife Barbara and I have been married for 40 years. We've been blessed with 4 children and 2 grandchildren. I'm running for governor to make sure we give our children, your children and my children, what my parents gave me, a better Maryland. I'm not a career politician, but I have spent a long career getting things done in large organizations, both public and private. I chaired the University System of Maryland, the largest public agency in the state, which has a budget greater than any political subdivision. I led a transportation coalition that created a transportation plan for the entire state. And I grew my law firm over 22 years as its leader to the largest law firm in Maryland and one of the largest in the world.
Thank you. Ms. Vignarajah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Krish Vignarajah, and it is an honor to be here. The last time I was speaking at Hood College, I was 8.5 months pregnant, delivering the Hood commencement speech, and I remember Andrea, or most commonly known as Pres Chat, had to tow me to the stage because I think she was fearful that if I took a single step, I would induce and go into labor. Things have been a little bit different. I now return to Hood College with my daughter and my husband in tow. I was actually Alana's age, 9 months old, when my family fled a civil war in Sri Lanka and came to America and Maryland. They came with no jobs, $200 in their pockets, and 2 very young kids in their arms. My parents were both Baltimore City public school teachers. I myself am a product of Maryland Public Schools. I became Michelle Obama's policy director at the White House, and before that, senior advisor to Secretary Clinton and Secretary Kerry, and before that, I had been a lawyer as well as in business. I know we can change the state of play, and that's why I'm running for governor. Thank you.
Mr. Ross.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alec Ross, and I'm running for governor of Maryland because if there's one thing I've learned in my 46 years of life, it's that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not here in Maryland. I'm a former 6th grade teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. Married the math teacher across the hall, who's still teaching math in Baltimore City Public Schools, and my 3 kids are in the public schools. that I then somewhat improbably got into technology. That culminated many years later in my running technology policy for Barack Obama's first presidential campaign, and then having the opportunity to serve in his administration, setting up about $35 billion worth of the Economic Recovery Act programs and working at the State Department. I'm trying to bring a new face and new ideas into the Democratic Party and into the governor's office. I have a lot of executive branch experience. I have thousands of employees and hundreds of millions of dollars of budget, but I didn't come through the Maryland farm system for politics. So I'm trying to bring a new face and new ideas into the governor's mansion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kamenetz.
Well, hi, I'm Kevin Kamenetz. I'm the Baltimore County Executive, lifelong Marylander, lifelong Democrat. I'm husband to Jill, father of 2 teenagers, former prosecutor, a 4-term council member, and in my 2 terms as Baltimore County Executive, we've improved our schools, we've created jobs, we've protected the environment, all without raising the tax rates. I'm running with Valerie Urban, elected to the school board and 2 terms on the Montgomery County Council, and together we're the only ticket that has Maryland governing experience, a track record of real results, but also the passion to get things done again in Maryland. I'm Kevin Kamenetz, and I approve of this message.
Thank you. And Mr. Jealous.
Well, good afternoon. Try it one more time. Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's great to be here with you. How many folks were out like me marching yesterday? Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We've got to fight harder to restore hope for our young people. My name is Ben Jealous. I'm a civil rights leader and a businessman. My family moved to Maryland in 1941. Granddad came up to work at the B&O Railroad. Grandma went to work for Planned Parenthood. He became a probation officer. She became a social worker and helped train a young social worker named Barbara McCullough. I'm running for governor because it's time for us to pull our folks together and get back to doing big things again. Because I know how to manage things well. I was named Marylander of the Year in 2013, the Baltimore Sun, because in 1 year I led the successful effort to abolish the death penalty.
Thank you.
And I'll tell you about the rest later.
We will now move on to the question and answer portion of our forum. This is a question for Mr. Jim Shea, Ms. Krish Vignarajah, and Mr. Kevin Kamenetz. Many Marylanders, such as young people, teachers, and police officers, cannot afford to live in the communities in which they work. How can the percentage of income spent on housing in these areas be brought more into line with starting salaries and median income? Starting with Mr. Shea.
Thank you for the question. We have a serious problem at getting young people off to a good start in our world today. We burden them with student debt. We create housing that's so expensive they can't afford it. We really need a comprehensive housing policy that brings the cost of housing down. Way too many Marylanders, even if they're not young, spend more than half their income on housing. The way to do that is to create incentives for developers to build housing, affordable housing, throughout the areas that we need it. These incentives can take many forms, but typically involve various financial breaks. We need to make sure this housing is healthy, that the housing is well built, that it accommodates seniors and others, that it doesn't cause asthma and other difficult health problems. And we need to make sure our neighborhoods are mixed income neighborhoods. We've done that in Maryland. Columbia is a great example of what can be done when you use planning and, in some cases, zoning to create different income levels in your neighborhoods. It's very important for the schools, for the community togetherness, and bringing society together. So the housing issues are important. I will address them with the importance that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vignarajah?
I'm glad you asked that as the first question, because we realize here in Maryland this is actually one of the biggest issues we face. And one of the highest hurdles in the sense that Maryland actually has the third worst affordable housing problem behind Hawaii and California. And you realize that what we need to do has to be comprehensive. So first, what I want to see us do is recognize that government especially can play a role here. I want to make sure that we're actually mandating that we have permanent affordable housing in urban areas across the state. But obviously here in Frederick, you recognize how critical an issue this is. Boulder, for example, has mandated that 20% of housing created has to be permanently affordable. That's the kind of programming we can institute here. But second, what I want to do is make sure that we are creating incentives, as Jim mentioned, to create new construction that allows for us to create this new fill mixed income housing. I know Michael O'Connor, for example, has been talking a lot about that. But likewise, we need to make sure that we're creative. We need to rehab housing. We need to acquire housing. We need to make sure that all of those opportunities are afforded in the urban, the semi-urban, and the rural areas. But third, I want to make sure that we're actually growing the economy, because we realize that in Maryland, you need to have a $30 an hour job in order to actually have housing be affordable. We know that in Montgomery County and Winter County, that's not doable. And that's where we need to talk about real job solutions. How do we actually grow our economy? Because that's how we're going to make housing affordable for everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Kamenetz?
So, Baltimore City is a separate jurisdiction than Baltimore County, but a lot of the issues that are taking place in the city are due to the lack of affordable housing in safe neighborhoods with good schools. In Baltimore County, we've tried to address this as well by creating a $30 million incentive fund where when there's new developments taking place, developers can apply to us and we can buy down the cost of certain units that they will guarantee will become affordable. But we also have to start focusing on what the reasons are that we can't afford things. And that comes down to solid investments in education, making sure that we bring universal pre-K to every 3- and 4-year-old. Those are the toddlers who aren't getting the academic enrichment before their school career even starts. So we need to prevent that achievement gap before it even begins. But we also need to focus on how we can do job skill training. In Baltimore County, we don't just sit there and say we're going to write blank checks to big corporations and call that economic development. We work with our existing large employers, find out who they're hiring, and then train people through our schools, our colleges and trade schools to acquire those very skills so they graduate not just with a diploma in their hand, but the opportunity for a job in their hand. And finally, of course, we have to implement a $15 minimum wage and truly make things affordable again. We work on education, job skill training, improving economic conditions, and incentives for housing. We bring everyone up. Thank you. That's been our experience in Baltimore County.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our next question. This is a question for Mr. Jealous and Mr. Madaleno. What are your plans to address the pressing needs for infrastructure that supports economic growth, such as transportation and internet broadband infrastructure in Western Maryland? Starting with Mr. Jealous.
We need to have a public transportation plan for the entire state. It's like an afterthought, and quite frankly, our thinking, if you listen to our governor, is often stuck in the 1970s. We've got to make sure that we are actually making it easier for people to get to their jobs where they are now. And that means that we have to invest in expanding and updating BART, expanding and extending Metro, also investing in bus rapid transit and building new trains to connect people in places where we never thought that we would. We have to deal with the housing issue that exacerbates the transportation issue. Build more inclusive communities where people can actually work where they live. We have to also, when it comes to our infrastructure, make sure that we are modernizing things in ways that allow us to reap real benefits. I'll tell you about a conversation I had. It was with the superintendent of Baltimore City Schools after I got into a Twitter battle with the lieutenant governor over the boilers. The kids were freezing, and he didn't show up to the meeting before press cameras did, and it was a political one, I guess. But that wouldn't help the kids. And so I called the superintendent and I said, do you have any boilers that are more than 30 years old? She said, pretty much all of them. I said, that's good news. She said, why? I said, because we actually don't need a new capital allocation. We can replace all of them, financing them, paying them off in less than 3 years, just with the savings on the monthly power bill. New HVAC systems are so much less expensive, and you'll save so much on that bill. But you'll also drive up student attendance because every boiler produces smog that recirculates through the building and triggers asthma attacks. When we replace those boilers, the air will get cleaner and more kids will be in school. That's the type of forward thinking that we need.
Mr. Madaleno.
So as the one candidate up here who actually has his name on a series of tax increases that actually pay for the infrastructure that we are doing right now, and we will, I'm sure, be criticized from Governor Hogan. We have been investing in trying to improve transportation, but we have not focused it, I think, under the Hogan administration over the last 4 years as to where it's going to do the most good for the public. We need, and with me as governor, we will invest in extending and expanding service from Mark to Frederick and making it a more viable system that runs into the city. We will work with VRE in Virginia to have trains run on a regular basis throughout the day. We will throw out Larry Hogan's plan to put 4 more lanes on 270 for an outrageous amount of money and work between the 2 counties to come up with a solution that moves traffic on the 270 corridor. I think there might be the need for more capacity on 270, but having 4 lanes and charging $30 to go from here down to Bethesda one way is an outrageous plan. We will invest in bringing infrastructure, including the connectivity to the internet through Western Maryland. We need to work with the utilities, we need to work with the cable companies to make sure we get that cable down to and out to everyone's home. Right now we have a problem. We've got the backbone there, but we have not been able to get the wires to people's homes. And there are some creative ways to work with incentives with the companies and incentives with the homeowners in order to get the wire to the person's home. But make no mistake, Larry Hogan is not interested in making these hard decisions in the future. He is interested in rewarding a handful of communities that are the backbone of his support.
Thank you. So this is a question for Krish Vignarajah and Alec Ross. The rate of economic growth is quite variable across Maryland. What specific policies would you advocate to attract and retain young people in Western Maryland? Starting with Ms. Vignarajah.
What's going to be interesting in this election is that Governor Hogan has obviously sort of built a name for himself among most voters that he's actually kept Maryland open for business. But if you actually think about the metrics, we're abysmal. We come in 28th to 33rd when it comes to unemployment rates. If you look at how we are, if we took the federal government jobs out of our economy, we would have the worst unemployment rate in the country. And so for me, this is about how do we actually put together a holistic package that puts us where we should be, which is top of the nation. So for me, it's first some things that have been touched on, which is investing in infrastructure. I want to make sure that Maryland's the first state to actually guarantee universal high-speed broadband across the state. And this is where that's particularly important because in Western Maryland, we have an opportunity to actually bring the economy to people. Second, I want to make sure that we're actually growing the biotech I-270 corridor, the cybersecurity corridors, the IT corridors, because we have all of the pieces here in state. We have the highest number of graduate degrees in the state. We have world-class universities like Hood College, UMBC, Johns Hopkins. We have the largest number of federal dollars spent in the state, NIST, Fort Detrick, FDA, NIH. And yet we come in 28th when it comes to startups. We get 0.5% of venture capital funding. We could do so much better. CREST is a great program here in Frederick that we could grow across the state to actually make sure that we are top of the nation when it comes to biotech. But the final piece of it is the outdoor economy and clean energy. Because this is where in Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore, we could actually market ourselves as having the best hunting, biking, birding, fishing east of the Mississippi. And so when people talk about banning fracking, we know that they're not doing it for the fun of it. They're doing it because that's the economic livelihood. But if we actually invest in the access to resources, just as you've done in terms of Carroll Creek, you know that we could get people on the eastern seaboard to come to Maryland. But likewise, when it comes to clean energy, offshore wind and solar panels, we can institute policy.
Mr. Ross?
So this question hits a little close to home for me. I grew up in the coal country. My parents are still there, uncles, aunts. But I had to move to Baltimore to get a job because in coal country, obviously, their jobs are few and far between. And what's interesting about a lot of Western Maryland, what's interesting a lot about folks who are country folks, they don't really oftentimes want to leave, but they sometimes are forced to because you can either stay there and be part of the continued economic descent, or you can just sort of hold on. There isn't much in terms of growth. Now, I will say, Frederick, I think, has been a tremendous model. If you think about Frederick 20 years ago, Frederick today, it shows what we can do in our small and medium-sized cities to build something here. Now, Rich mentioned earlier that we have the internet backbone coming through here. We have the internet backbone coming through here because when there was George W. Bush and the Wall Street banks economic crisis, and Barack Obama was elected, I was in charge of a lot of the Economic Recovery Act. And what we did is we built the program that brought fiber through Western Maryland. That backbone was built. The thing that helps create LTE on all of your mobile phones was enabled by stuff we did during the Obama administration. I want to finish the job. I want to finish the job and bring the fastest, lowest cost connectivity into these communities, because that is what will enable the entrepreneurship. That is a big part of what will enable people to stay. And the last thing that I would say is we do need to focus some of our state economic development dollars, not just from Montgomery County, Howard County, Baltimore City, but increasingly get further out on I-70 and I-68.
Thank you. So this next question is for Kevin Kamenetz and Ben Jealous. What are your plans to make college education affordable and still maintain high quality? Mr. Kamenetz?
Well, just last week in Baltimore County, we announced the College Promise Program, where a college-ready student who has, in high school, maintains a 2.5 GPA, has demonstrated their ability to be college-ready, but yet, because of their income level, cannot afford college. And now in Baltimore County, starting this fall, that student will be eligible to enter the Community College of Baltimore County debt-free. And it's a perfect investment because we've already demonstrated this person has the capability to be successful in college, but we also want to make sure that they have the ability to actually go to college and succeed. And it's not only for an associate's degree, but also for certifications for workplace and other trades as well. So we're very excited about this program. But in addition, last year, we implemented early college high school in Baltimore County, where any 9th grader can enter at Woodlawn High School and within 4 years not only receive their high school diploma, but an associate's degree from the Community College of Baltimore County, all tuition free. So it's these types of initiatives where we can have the most success in ensuring that people have the opportunity to go to college. At the same time, let me just clarify, not everyone needs to go to college to succeed. And we have career training education that takes place in our high schools to guide people toward other areas in which they can still succeed and afford to make a living in trades or other certifications. That's how we get everyone the opportunity to move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jealous?
You know, the secret here in Maryland, I say this as an uncle who's got his 19-year-old nephew out of his basement, is that we don't have a shortage of good jobs for our kids as much as we have a shortage of our kids that we've trained for the good jobs that we have. In Maryland, we import people for everything. Truckers, welders, art teachers, nurses, programmers. We must do a better job of training our young people for the opportunities that are raised. How do we get there? We get there by having the courage to stand up and say we've got to get our priorities straight. I said early on that I agree with Bernie Sanders that we should go back to the days of our public universities being tuition free. And we won't get there right away, but we can make big strides in that direction. Funny thing happened when I said that. A fellow Democrat came out and said it was irresponsible for me to say that without having the plan right there. Well, I'll roll out that plan in the next few weeks. But here's the funny thing. That same Democrat did not come out and criticize Larry Hogan 2 weeks before that when he called for a return to truth in sentencing, a failed war on drugs policy that is insanely expensive. Over the last 40 years, we've spent more and more in incarceration. We've spent less and less on public higher education. And the way that we get there is we make our community colleges tuition free, and we're not be afraid to, for instance, say the hedge fund managers should pay a higher effective tax rate than their secretaries. We push more of our classes from our community colleges into our high schools through dual credit programs so that young people come out ready for a career and for college. But we ultimately reverse engineer what's happened over the last 40, 50 years in states across this country.
Thank you. This is a question for Rich Madaleno, Jim Shea, and Alec Ross. How can Maryland students be incentivized to consider the economic opportunities found in skilled trade professions, high-tech manufacturing, and other professions that do not require a 4-year degree? Starting with Mr. Madaleno.
Well, some of you may know the state currently has a Blue Ribbon Commission put together that's being chaired by the former Chancellor of the University System, Rick. So it's known affectionately as the Kerwin Commission, the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. I'm one of the 8 legislators who's on that because of my work and experience in education and finance, and as the Vice Chairman of the Budget and Taxation Committee. So we are doing that by actually building strong career and technology education programs as part of our recommendations for what the future of K through 12 will look like in the state of Maryland. And it's the reason why I'm running for governor, because I want to see these recommendations implemented, because they are the most critical thing we can do to build a strong, prosperous Maryland built for the future. Now, we're going to do that by bringing in real programs into the high schools, make them broadly accessible for all young people to have that experience with career and technology education, to see the path that if you want to go into coding, you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree. You can get out, you can get a great family supporting job with a certification, and you can get that as part of your high school diploma. We are moving forward with legislation that I'm proud that Ron Young has been one of the leaders on this year, about making sure that every young person in the state, in fact, everyone in Maryland, will have the opportunity to do one free job training certificate at a community college. Our community colleges around the state have those opportunities, that you can get that certification after 6 months or 1 year that would give you that opportunity to go out to get that job as a computer coder or as an HVAC technician. We have those resources. We just have to make sure we open those doors and let people know that those programs will be available to them.
Thank you. Mr. Shea?
For way too long, we have had a hierarchy of education that doesn't make any sense. We have elevated the notion that going to a four-year college is the be-all and end-all, and ignored the fact that being trained for a flourishing life and career is really the point of education. So my education plan, which is fully drawn up and published, jimshea.com, kind of like to ring that, has in it as its core vocational education. And what we need to do in the pre-K through 12 system, as well as community colleges, to prepare people to have the skills to fill the jobs that we have. We have plenty of skills, plenty of jobs. They need skills. You tried to get a plumber lately, an electrician, somebody to work on your car, a computer technologist. There are lots and lots of jobs. We need to make sure our schools are teaching the skills that match those jobs. I have long been part of the business community, and as chair of the University System of Maryland, long a part of the education community. I will challenge, indeed I challenge today, those two groups to get together and make sure that what we're teaching matches what we need. And both of those groups need to step up and do that. My plan calls for it, and it will happen. All too often in this area of education, we get told we can't afford it. That is not true. We can afford it, and we need to make sure that we distribute the funds for education quite equally and broadly. There's a recent report just out that demonstrates Marylanders' complacency on this issue. In this recent report, comparing Maryland nationwide, we got a D in the amount of funding that is provided and a D in the equity of the funding that goes around the state. That needs to end. That's a regressive system of funding education, whether you're talking about academic or vocational, and we need to reverse that.
Thank you. Mr. Ross?
A lot of the folks who I grew up with, we've just failed. Look, they move between bottle, pill, sometimes go to the needle. In part because folks who grew up in communities like the one that I did, not everybody was going to go to college, and they didn't have a path to doing anything other than pushing them off. Now, I worked as a midnight janitor. I'm going to put myself through college. I got real lucky, and then got on a path that got me up to this table today, but that's a rarity. And if this is a case where I think we have to hold ourselves to account. This isn't an area where we can just sort of finger wag at Larry Hogan. Look, be honest. The rhetoric and policies of the Democratic Party for the last 20 to 30 years have been you go to college and you're a winner. You don't go to college and you're a loser. We have to own that. We have to own that in Maryland. Because guess what? Democrats have controlled the General Assembly and been governor a whole heck of a lot. Been a little bit of rhetoric, but not a whole heck of a lot of action. This is a place where I will bring absolute ferocity as governor. I'm going to say, you know what, we are going to go from being a party of super elites, the party of Boston and San Francisco, into focusing on those communities and those people who we've been poorly serving, who've become radicalized, who are voting for Donald Trump, who are outside of mainstream. Look, we need a world-class apprenticeship system in Maryland. We're perfectly suited for it. We have a barbell economy. We have lots of knowledge workers. Lots of people go to church wearing white shirts and orange ties or lab coats. And lots of people working at or around minimum wage. But we've got a thin middle. Average age of a plumber, 61. Average age of an electrician, 59. I want to bring the model that my friend John Hickenlooper, a really good governor of Colorado, put in place a couple years ago in Colorado, make it work for Maryland, serve people in all 24 jurisdictions here.
Thank you. This next question we will hear from Alec Ross, Kevin Kamenetz, and Rich Madaleno. What steps will you take to guarantee a strong and healthy future for our family-owned farms? Starting with Mr. Ross.
So farming is, look, that's one of the hardest industries that anybody can be working in. It's at once timeless, but it's also more prone to change than anything else. I remember when I was traveling, I was in the North Island of New Zealand, and Manawatu-Wangui. And there are something like 80,000 people there with 2 million cows. And the farmers in Manawatu-Wangui were explaining to me how they had increased exports of their beef and cattle products to China by 500%. You can read the long version of this in my book, The Industries of the Future. And what they basically said is the way that we've gone from farming like our fathers and grandfathers to really viable family-owned 21st century farms is through precision agriculture. The mashup of big data analytics and agriculture. Maryland is the white-hot center of innovation in artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, applied big data analytics. What we need to do is we need to take people with domain expertise in those fields, marry them up with our farmers, and help them help them incorporate these innovations into their farming techniques. It's already beginning to happen to spectacular effect. I asked the folks these cattle farmers in New Zealand how they did it, and they said, "Oh yeah, we went to these kids at the software company in the local university. Said, is there anything you guys are doing that can help us farm differently?" I think that Maryland is perfectly situated to become world leaders in terms of precision agriculture. That's what will help us compete regionally. That's what will help us compete globally.
Thank you. Mr. Kamenetz?
So a lot of my thesis here is that when we elect a governor, you want to elect someone who's lived in this state their whole life, who has the experience of this, what our state offers, but also has the governing experience so you can apply that to solve solutions for the state. So here's what we did in Baltimore County. Baltimore County, 2/3 of our land mass is zoned rural in nature. And 90% of our population live on 30% of the land. And we use strict zoning, some of the most conservative zoning in the country, one house every 50 acres, in order to ease the development pressure and allow farmers to continue their profession. It's worked well, of course, in Baltimore County. We have maintained our agricultural heritage because of that conservative land use policies. The other aspect is allowing farmers to gain additional revenue from non-farming sources. So we're allowing our farmers to have solar panels on 5% of their land. So it's not enough that they're going to leave farming, but it is enough that they can generate side income to continue to boost that opportunity. And the last thing, I'm the immediate past president of the Maryland Association of Counties, and I work closely with council members all across the state. Matt Holloway is a farmer in Wicomico County as well as a county councilman. And I sat down with him once and he started talking about his farming and the hydroponics, very similar to what Alec was talking about, but he's making it a reality. I said, "How long has your family been in farming?" He says, "Never. I went to college to learn these new modern skills and now applying it in the industry of farming." So these are all things we need to do to get farming protected and moving forward.
Mr. Madaleno?
Thank you for the question. Interestingly, we have land-grant institutions in our state. The University of Maryland College Park, the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. We are a leader in some of the things that Alec was talking about, because we have been investing in these programs. We passed legislation just this past week that helps with the next generation of farming, helping farmers invest in that equipment. With the chairman of the Finance Committee, Mac Middleton from Southern Maryland, the one farmer who's in the state Senate, he has been leading us for years on how we help farmers invest in the equipment that helps them move to this brighter technological future, helps them use satellite positioning to more properly run the tractors and plant on the fields. I have been one of the leaders in the legislature in standing up to, in fact, big chicken and working on the Eastern Shore to help the small farmers. I don't know if people realize this, the way that the chicken industry works around the world and around our country and our state, but chicken farmers are like modern sharecroppers. No one functions the way that chicken farmers function in our economy. You need a governor who's going to stand up to those big agricultural interests and fight for the little farmers. You need a governor who's going to be pushing for the innovative programs that help provide farmers with access to financing. Farmers are like other small business people. One of the biggest challenges is their lack of capital, or the challenge of getting capital. It's important for the state to play that function of helping farmers with their investments so that they can constantly stay ahead and competitive in their field. And we can do that in the state of Maryland. We've been doing that already through the innovative policies that we have continued to push through the legislature and through prior Democratic administrations.
Thank you. This next question will be addressed by Mr. Jim Shea, Mr. Alec Ross, and Mr. Ben Jealous. How will you control the cost of health care and health insurance premiums? Starting with Mr. Shea.
During my career, I have represented every sector of the healthcare system: patients, doctors, hospitals, physician groups, and insurers. Controlling the cost of healthcare is absolutely crucial, and all sectors have to play a role in developing the innovation that we need to control the health cost. Any system imposed by one group on another inevitably leads to unintended and ineffective consequences. So the first thing I would do would be to convene all of those groups to work on innovative projects. Ultimately, in the long run, that's the very short run, in the long run, we probably need a single-payer system in this country. Winston Churchill said, Americans can be counted on to do the right thing, but only after they've exhausted every other option. And that's pretty much where we are on a single payer. The problem with moving to single payer is it can't be done overnight, because you have a lot of employers, for example, who are paying for insurance right now, and we don't want to disrupt that prematurely. And secondly, for a single state to take on a single payer system is prohibitively expensive. Vermont, Bernie Sanders' own state, looked at it and in a referendum decided not to do it because the tax hikes were too high. In Oregon, another state that is solidly blue, looked at it and decided not to go forward. We'll get to single payer, but in the short term, we need to keep premiums and healthcare costs down in this state. We have a waiver from the federal government, CMS, that is worth $1 billion or $2 billion a year to Marylanders, and that goes to keeping healthcare costs down. We need to keep that waiver. It's enormously complicated and it's at risk. Because Larry Hogan has not appointed capable people to his health department, we are at risk of losing that waiver in an application that's due next summer. That won't be a problem with my administration.
Mr. Ross?
Around this time last year, my 11-year-old son, we had a horrible, it was more than a health scare. My 11-year-old was found to have some growths in his neck. Because I married the right woman, he had the perfect pediatrician who got him quickly to Johns Hopkins. Diagnosed some problems. They said he needs to take a genetic test, but bad luck, this genetic test costs $6,000. If he tests positive, it's a really bad result. He's going to have to get a pretty significant surgery. My health insurance paid for that $6,000 genetic test. It was not a good result. Within a week, he was at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia getting a really scary surgery that turned out okay. God bless my little boy. It's horrendous that my son is alive today but might not otherwise be alive, but for his daddy who can pay $2,300 a month for health insurance. And so we have got to change our healthcare system in Maryland. It is not single payer right now, Medicare for all right now, for the simple fact that Donald Trump is president, and you have to get a federal waiver. And I'm sorry, kids are sick. Now we need reforms. Now we can't wait for Bernie Sanders or whomever else to become president and give that waiver. I want to know what we can do in 2019, in 2020, and before we get a Democratic president. I don't want a plan built just on that. So I think that we need to, first of all, we need to go after the drug companies who are crushing us. Secondly, we have to look at these health insurers. 58% increase from CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield, 73% from Kaiser Permanente, just signed off on by Larry Hogan. We have got to attack the source of these costs, starting with the prescription drug programs and going after the health insurance companies.
Thank you. Mr. Jealous?
So we have to build a movement in this state to make sure that everybody has health care. And that's core to this campaign. I started to say earlier, 1 year I led the successful effort to abolish the death penalty. That year I also co-chaired the successful effort to pass the DREAM Act. I put organizers on the ground to help pass marriage equality. And they told us that all of those would be impossible. Any one of them was unlikely, but all together it would be impossible, and we got to do it. When you look at the situation with healthcare in our state, we have to move quickly. It is choking our small businesses. It's killing our neighbors. Our healthcare system is in the top 5 causes of untimely death in our state. So how do we get there? I put a plan on the table, both for what we will do in the 2 years it should take to build a consensus to pass state-based Medicare for all. And that, Alec's absolutely right. We've got to move forward on recruiting people for the ACA and doing everything we can. But by the time we have a new president in the White House, we'll be prepared to ask for the final waivers that we need to make sure everybody in Maryland has health care, and this is how we'll do it. This is why we'll do it. First, we have to recognize we really have no other choice. Other folks will talk about universal health care. That's code for a public option. The RAND Corporation, very centrist think tank, will tell you that won't cost much because it won't do much. They looked at Oregon. They said Oregon, the only viable solution was to move to single payer. You can do it with one state. Vermont was too small, but it's the size of Baltimore. Our state's about 10 times larger. And when we do it, if we don't cut overhead by half, we'll cut it by 80%, because systems like England and France and Germany, the overhead is 8-9%. Here right now it's 18-19%. We will also get a better deal on pharmaceuticals. The only way we can take on the pharmaceutical companies in our country is through our state, and it's urgent because we're paying 2 to 5 times as much per day. The plan is on our website. It's benjealous.com. It's called MD Care.
Thank you. This next question will be addressed by Krish Vignarajah and Kamenetz. What are your plans to make life in Maryland more comfortable for the differently abled? Ms. Vignarajah? Differently abled?
In a state like Maryland, we realize that we have to face a high cost of living, a high tax burden, because we provide social services not just to the wealthy and lucky amongst us, but to the most marginalized and poorest and most needy among us. And so part of what I want to see is that on the range of issues that we're talking, that your question implicates, that we provide services. Now, on one of these issues, I'm going to probably become unpopular in this crowd, but Governor Hogan, when it comes to the deaf, has actually been more proactive than on many of the other policies that we've touched on thus far. And that's where I think that there is an opportunity, though, because we have the Maryland School for the Deaf here. And we know that there is an opportunity, because part of what we need to do is make sure that we provide a range of services that integrate them into the broader community. But likewise, for other populations, there are a set of goals or solutions that we need to institute that apply across the board. One of them is making sure that we integrate them into our school systems, into our classrooms, and this is actually a very personal issue for me. My parents were both school teachers. My dad finally retired at the age of 80 this past June. And one of the things that he would talk to you about is that whether it is special education, whether it is folks with special needs, we do not provide those services within our schools. And whether it is elementary, middle school, high school level, or beyond, we do need to make sure that we're providing those services. But second, what I want to make sure that we're actually doing is providing an economy, because time and time again, you see ably willed folks who can actually be part of our productive workforce, and yet they're not, because we're not kind of providing that platform. Governor Markell actually in Delaware has done this, and part of that is actually making sure that we're providing employers the opportunities to hire people who actually have the skill sets that they provide. But more broadly, this is where, from cradle to career, we need to provide a set of services, and that's what I would do as governor.
Thank you. Mr. Kamenetz?
When I was growing up, we talked politics at the table all the time. And my dad was a big supporter of Hubert Humphrey. And I'm always asked, who was your political hero? And finally I see a crowd here who is mature enough to even know who Hubert Humphrey is. But Hubert Humphrey said in his dying days in the United States Senate that the moral test of government is how it treats those in the dawn of life, our children. How it treats those in the twilight of life, the elderly. And how it treats those in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and his words, the handicapped. Now, we're Democrats because of this. I worked at my father's drugstore. My dad was a pharmacist. He had one of those little corner drugstores we don't see anymore. And all 5 of us had to work our childhood in the drugstore. And in that store, I quickly learned that being the boss's son didn't make me privileged. It meant that I had to work harder than anyone else. It meant that I was the one who had to go out and sweep the sidewalk of trash every morning. And when someone couldn't afford to pay for a prescription, I learned about people's lot in life. Dad would say, "It's okay, you just pay me when you can." So these are the values in which I was raised. And these are the values I've always tried to serve as county executive and the leader I'll be as governor. This is why we're Democrats, and this is why we need to make sure that we represent all Marylanders. Thank you.
Thank you. So this next question will be directed towards Alec Ross, Ben Jealous, and Jim Shea. What are your short-term and long-term plans to combat the opioid crisis in Western Maryland? Starting with Mr. Ross.
So short-term, I think we need to quickly move to treatment on demand. It's when somebody who is seeking help shows up and they say, "We can see you in 6 weeks," you're probably not going to see those folks again. We also need wider access to Butte, to Narcan. Look, there's a blueprint for what we know can and should be done over the short term. We need to fund that blueprint. In the same way in which Ronald Reagan and then George H.W. Bush ignored the HIV/AIDS crisis, and then Bill Clinton came in and we had a national strategy for how to take on the HIV/AIDS crisis. I think that we need a strategy that really takes on this public health crisis for what it is. Longer term, though, I think there's a fabulous opportunity here in Maryland for us to be the leaders. There's some interesting research that I think the state should support at the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins for non-opioidal pain treatment, non-opioidal prescription pain treatment. If we can get folks not to get those prescriptions that begin the addiction, I think that would be a good start. I'm also in favor of the legalization of recreational marijuana. When people ask me, does marijuana kill people? Smoking marijuana doesn't kill people, but the illegal trade of marijuana does kill people. And if we can if folks will smoke marijuana legally, instead of popping oxy or shooting fentanyl-laced heroin, we will have a healthier state. So short term, we have to build the public health infrastructure that's necessary. We need to legalize recreational marijuana. And longer term, I think this is the state where we can do the R&D that will unleash non-opioidal pain treatment.
Thank you. Mr. Jealous.
The first policy platform I rolled out was our plan to deal with the opioid crisis. It's killing people across the state. I'm sat with a 13-year-old girl, blonde ponytail, tennis racket in her hand. All she wanted to talk about was the 3 classmates she's buried in the last year because they overdosed on pills. When I'm governor, we'll set up an office of pain management that will help make sure our doctors are trained across the state in the alternatives, so doctors don't unwittingly get their patients addicted. We'll make sure that we have rehab on demand. We'll make sure that we have crisis response teams serving every corner of our state. Our state legislature, as I recall, recommended 10 or 11. The governor ultimately agreed to fund 1 in Baltimore. We need them everywhere. We will also go after, even more aggressively, the doctors who turned into drug dealers, pill manufacturers that are behind this. Long term, we've got to recognize we have a crisis of hope in our state. Whether it's the violence in Baltimore or it's the deaths from overdoses, young people who are full of hope don't kill each other, and young people who are full of hope don't kill themselves. I've also said that we should legalize cannabis. It will help bring down violence. I'm not sure how much it actually helps with the opioid epidemic, although some folks would say it does. But we absolutely need to make sure that we connect our public universities and our community colleges more dynamically to our industry so that our public education system becomes the fastest pipeline of talent into every industry in the state. Long term, we have to increase the hope of our young people. Everything that we're doing in this campaign is designed to unleash the entrepreneurial prowess latent within Maryland, including pushing for health care for all. The moment that we detach healthcare from employment, we'll see a lot more entrepreneurs in our economy creating a lot more jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Shea?
Let me start by saying what I won't do. I'm not going to rely exclusively on press conferences announcing states of emergency and doing nothing as a result. That's what our governor is currently doing. What I would do is I'd make sure we had many more and much better equipped and supported community health centers. Not only do they need the personnel and the equipment to do their job, we need to organize them. I had a great trip to St. Mary's County last week and met with the head of Walden Sierra, Dr. O'Brien, who has established a program in 6 different centers of a continuum of care, because that's what we need. Some people can handle with very light outpatient treatment, but extends well into the far end of the spectrum where you need inpatient treatment. So I would make sure that we've got those community health centers and that we've organized them and they've got a program that brings people to health. Of course, we make sure that Narcan is available on demand. We'd have our first responders equipped with it. All of these things are needed to take care of the immediate crisis. On a longer term basis, one of the fundamental problems with addiction is that we stigmatize it. We think it's a moral failing if you're addicted. We don't recognize it as a medical condition that needs to be treated. Long term, we have to reverse that thinking, because you're never really going to root out the problem if you stigmatize the people who have it. We don't criticize people for having a heart attack. We don't turn them away from treatment if they've got a serious blood disorder. We need to make sure we're taking care of people with the disease of addiction. One of the tragedies of this is that it's not just the downtrodden and those who are out of hope. This crisis is catching people who are prosperous and doing well and should have a great life ahead of them, but for this medical problem. We can't solve it with the criminal justice system, and we can't solve it if we're going to stigmatize the patient.
Thank you. So this next question is for Rich Madaleno and Krish Vignarajah. How do we balance the benefits of economic advancement with the agricultural and environmental needs of Western Maryland? Mr. Madaleno?
How do you balance the economic advancement of Western Maryland with the needs of the farming community?
Economic advancement, agricultural, and environmental needs.
Well, I think when you go back to some of the questions that we have already been talking about, you provide a strong opportunity for a vibrant local economy that makes the connection to both the agricultural sector and the other parts of the environmental community in Western Maryland, the outdoor recreation industry in the state. But there's a great article in Vox today that was talking about the connection between farming and local agriculture and the changes in the supermarket industry and the grocery industry, and the fact that with Amazon buying Whole Foods, with there being so much of a centralization, with Walmart and Target coming heavy into grocery stores, that in fact it's the local independent farmers who are being hammered the most. And we have to work with the local food community, whether that is local grocery stores or that is the local restaurants, in order to make sure that there is a strong connection between the farming community and the opportunity for them to do business locally, the farm to table, the farm movement into restaurants, into schools. That sort of a connection will help, I think, make sure that strong family farms stay in place in Western Maryland and in other parts of the state. It's also investing in the environmental laws that we need to have in order to protect the outdoors of Western Maryland. I was proud to stand with so many of my colleagues and ban fracking and to move Larry Hogan from it's a great economic development tool to, in fact, joining us in saying no to fracking. I've been helping to lead the charge against the Potomac pipeline to make sure that we don't inadvertently weaken the ban that we've passed in fracking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Vignarajah?
I want to first start by, I guess, questioning the premise of the question, because I do think that oftentimes Democrats don't push back at this false dichotomy between supporting agriculture and our economy and the environmental considerations. And I think especially here in Maryland, you will see time and time again examples of where these are actually a win-win opportunity. My husband, Colin, who's sitting in the appropriate Colin-O'Mara Irish green on this side, is the CEO of the National Wildlife Federation. And we'll tell you time and time again, these are the debates that we have, not just here in Maryland, but at the national level. And so my point is, let's actually look for those win-win opportunities. And I think here in Maryland, there's two examples. One is clean energy, because this actually implicates issues not just of the economy and the environment, but of public health. Here in Maryland, we have the highest number of deaths due to air pollution. In Baltimore, you have the highest number of deaths of any city in the country. And that's where, if we actually recognize what we're doing, right now we're basically exporting dollars and importing pollution because Maryland consumes more energy than it produces. So why don't we actually produce that clean energy here in Maryland? And by that I mean in Western Maryland and in the Eastern Shore in particular. Let's invest in offshore wind. Let's invest in clean energy in terms of solar. Because we could, in the next 8 years, actually create 2,000 megawatts through offshore wind, 500 megawatts at least through solar. But second, in terms of the outdoor economy, let's recognize things like when I kicked off my campaign, I kicked it off with a hike of Swallow Falls. Because in Maryland, our two biggest economies are agriculture and tourism. So let's actually invest in access to those resources so that when anyone thinks about vacationing, they come to Savage River or Deep Creek or the Eastern Shore, because we have those opportunities. And if we do, we could see a growth not just in our economy, but in protecting sustainability.
Thank you. This next question is for Ben Jealous and Jim Shea. 90% of Frederick County businesses employ less than 100 employees. What are your plans to foster a strong, small business-based economy in areas of the state where there's no dominant employer? Starting with Mr. Jealous.
We have to put our government back on the side of small business. Our governor is acting the way you would expect a desperate politician who's a land developer to act. He lost one of our 4 Fortune 500 companies at the Discovery Channel after saying he would stop the flow. And now he wants to give a $5 billion blank check to the world's richest man to bring a company here to start off. It's a startup. I invest in startups every day, and I mentor them every month over at Johnson Hopkins Accelerator. And what I know is that there's a lot of growth to be grown if we decide that we'll take some of that money that we use to recruit corporations and we actually back our local banks to give lines of credit earlier to growing small businesses so they don't have to wait until they have 2 years of tax returns and deal with factoring and everything else in the meantime. There's a lot that needs to be done to actually make the culture of how we support our small businesses more intentional. In Virginia, your business property tax, if you have a small LLC, will be $75. In Maryland, the minimum tax is $350, and you'll spend $700 having your accountant fill out the forms. It's so complex. We'll fix that. We also will never forget that, for instance, a company like Amazon started in one room as a startup less than a generation ago. And we will make sure that we build the most vibrant startup economy on the East Coast. We'll do that by creating an Office of Tech Transfer in the governor's office to make it easier for people to take the great ideas resident in the federally funded research centers in our state and actually bring them to market and grow our economy. We'll make sure that we have universal broadband across the state so people can build factories, advanced manufacturing anywhere, but also just get their mom and pop business online. And we will invest in our ag economy, making sure we have 21st century ag hubs, and we will invest in making sure that people know that we're a great place to come.
Thank you. Mr. Shea?
I have spent a good part of my career working for and with and creating small businesses and startups. When I was chair of the empowerment zones in Baltimore for 10 years, we had capital programs, job creation, job training programs for small businesses and helped a lot of small businesses and startups get going in the stressed areas of Baltimore City. One of our applicants for a loan was a fellow who had a t-shirt business that he wanted to push. He applied to us in the Small Business Administration. His name was Kevin Plank. And he ultimately, of course, is majority shareholder in Under Armour. He, by the way, took the loan from the Small Business Administration. I don't want to mislead you. But the point is that we were in the capital business of helping small businesses. When I was chair of the University System of Maryland, we reined in the innovation that's throughout this system, all across the state. There are great research scientists who are coming up with innovative ideas. We created a committee for technology and transfer, commercialization, and while I was chair, in the 4 years I was chair, we created over 450 new businesses that, of course, employ many, many people. The biggest problem for small businesses is capital. You need to enable the business to get a chance to get that upfront money so they can start to produce jobs and livelihood for everyone. We ought to have financial incentives provided by the state that don't focus on how much money the businesses like to make. That's what banks do. We ought to focus on how many jobs the business is going to create. And if they're going to create a good number of well-paying jobs, then the government should step in where the banks won't and finance that. We get most of our jobs, most of our new jobs in a state like Maryland come from the businesses and the startups that we have here already, not out-of-state employers.
Thank you. So this next question is for Kevin Kamenetz, Rich Madaleno, and Krish Vignarajah. In other parts of Maryland, there's been an explosion of technology-related jobs, which was seeded by government investment in technology companies over the last 70 years. We have yet to see a government tech investment directed towards Western Maryland. How can you as governor bring jobs of this quality to Western Maryland? Starting with Kevin Kamenetz.
Baltimore County is home to 5 colleges, and we utilize them as economic development assets. First of all, they're big employers, but they're also producing people that are going to fill jobs. What we did was we started incubators at UMBC and at Towson University, and they're specialized to help start up businesses and technology businesses. They can only stay there for a year or two, but the collaboration that they develop among themselves, but also from the students that they then employ, help lead to that creativity to grow startup businesses in technology. You have assets here as well, and we're standing in one right now at Hood College. County Executive, you know, I'm sure you're supportive of this concept, and this would be a great opportunity for Hood College and all of our universities, colleges that are in Western Maryland. We need to utilize the existing assets that we already have in this state, and then figure out how do we make that grow and propel it. Thank you.
Mr. Madaleno.
The state has made significant investments across Western Maryland. The state has made sure that 68 it was connected to 70 with Silent Hill. The state has put in investments in things like Carroll Creek in order to make sure both the flooding in the city stopped, but it also created a vibrant ability for the downtown to grow. I mean, my family loves coming. This has been part of our routine. The Friday after Thanksgiving, we spend Black Friday up here for Frosty Friday, between the fairgrounds and the walking around the town, because it's a great place to come, to visit, to shop. We've helped build that community. The state has been a partner with the city, with the county, in order to make that happen. We have to make sure we bring whatever economic development tools and assets that the state has to come to be accessible in Western Maryland. I mean, I was kind of surprised by the question, because we have put money into a variety of tech firms throughout Western Maryland, so I don't want people to think that the state is not a partner. If you think that is certainly not the case under Larry Hogan, you will get a different answer out of a Madaleno Jenkins administration. With LaWanda, who I introduced at the beginning, LaWanda's background was actually running the state's small minority women-owned business programs. We will have an aggressive program to help bring capital, investment, job training, the things that you need in order to help businesses succeed and thrive. We will make sure that that is deployed around the state, and no part of the state is favored in that regard. But I think a continued investment in Western Maryland will be essential for moving the state forward, and you will definitely have that in a Madaleno Jenkins administration.
Thank you. Ms. Vignarajah?
We're not doing enough. Rich is absolutely right that there have been some basic investments, but the truth is that when you go to Western Maryland and you talk to people who are incredibly bright, I remember when I was at the Garrett Chamber of Commerce meeting, and you'd hear from parents who'd say, you know, my kids are stars, they're actually going to a robotics competition that's either within the state or on a national level. But in terms of actually getting the jobs that keep them and allow them to remain in their community, they don't exist. And that's what breaks my heart, because no child, no parent should lose their child because they can't find a job there. And that's where one of the things that I want to first see is that we're actually supporting the commercialization of research in terms of actually creating those startups. Because you saw in 2006, for example, we had a stem cell fund, which allowed for the fantastic research that's already happening in state to actually be seeded off into an economy that actually supports the research already happening. But second, part of that needs to be that the Appalachian Regional Commission, for example, needs to be a part of those conversations. And that's where I think that there is another opportunity. But the third part that is just broader than that is that you're seeing these little inklings of hope, in the sense that, you know, when I was in Washington County, you learned about how there were some small financial service companies that are there, but we need to support them. Part of that is universal high-speed broadband. When I would talk to Elizabeth Cromwell from the Frederick Chamber of Commerce, she'd say delegations would come here, then they would go to Loudoun County, and then they would decide to relocate there. That's where we need to make sure, especially that last mile, exists here in Maryland, because we have the opportunity. But let's start it even younger than that. Let's make sure that we're investing in science, technology, engineering, arts, math, not just at the high school levels, but at the elementary and middle school levels as well, because that's where we can prepare that pipeline of scientists that are there. But also let's make sure that when they come out of school, the job opportunities exist here in Maryland. We can make them and bring those jobs here.
Thank you. So our final question will be for everyone, and we're going to start with Mr. Kamenetz. With 9 candidates in the Democratic gubernatorial field, it's unlikely that the winner of the primary will command a majority of the votes. If you are not the nominee on June 26th, how will you mobilize your supporters on behalf of the nominee? Mr. Kamenetz?
So folks, this is not our first forum together. And we've really had a great opportunity. We all know each other's speeches so well, we could give the other speech right now. But I think what we really have developed is a sense of strong respect for each other. And I'm very proud of each of us who really tried to avoid criticizing each other, but focusing and keeping your eye on the prize, and that's Larry Hogan. So this is a Democratic state with a 2-to-1 Democrat-Republican registration. We only lose for governor when we don't turn out, and 120,000 or more failed to vote for governor last time. If there's one thing, and only one thing, that I have great confidence in President Trump, it's that he's going to continue to motivate Democrats. So I have a feeling here that we're going to unite after the Democratic primary, and we're all going to work together here. And I pledge my support to whomever is the Democratic nominee to take back our state. This is our state, our values. We're going to win in November, but only if we stay united. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jealous?
And Kevin just about said it all. It's a great team of folks, and we have a lot of respect for each other, and all of us are absolutely committed to beating Larry Hogan. The way that we will beat Larry Hogan is we'll stand for policies that give people a reason to turn out. Know that their state will get better because a Democrat is in charge. Pass a $15 minimum wage, we'll make sure everybody has health care, we'll make sure we fully fund education, keep those promises about the casino money and the lottery money. My running mate, Susie Turnbull, and Susie's a former chair of the Maryland Party back in 2010. What we both have excelled in politics is turning out voters. When she was chair of the party and our campaign manager, Travis Tazalar, was the ED, they turned out 125,000 more Democrats in 2010, even though it was tough times in most states for Dems, than we did in 2014, when Larry Hogan won by about half that. When I was president of the NAACP my last year, 2012, I and NAACP under my leadership were called the unsung heroes of Obama's re-election because we turned by Van Jones on CNN because we turned out 1.2 million unlikely voters. And I look forward to putting those skills to work if we beat Larry Hogan.
Thank you. Mr. Madaleno?
I just want to be sure, Hannah, this is not also the closing statement, right?
No, it's not.
Okay. So I think you've heard it. You've heard it from Kevin. You've heard it from Ben. You're going to hear it from us all. Look, the reason why you have an incredible group of people running is because the stakes are so high. And even though only one of us gets a chance to go on to the general election to face off with Larry Hogan, because those stakes are so high, because it's so important for us to have a strong Democratic governor back in the governor's house, that you're going to see a united front. I am definitely going to be working to make sure that not only is one of us elected governor, but that we win races around the state, that we as a party work very hard to get Jan Gardner re-elected in Frederick County, that we make sure that we hold the 3rd district, that we go after Michael Huff. Because there is no reason in a place like Frederick County that this is the type of representation you should have. Trust me, tomorrow night, when we're back in the Senate, Michael Huff is going to be there. He's going to be working against labor unions and a series of bills that I have to help strengthen public employee unions. He's going to be working against sensible gun violence prevention and the number of bills that we've got moving. These are the type of Republicans you have representing you in Frederick County. They are dragging the state of Maryland down, and we're going to have a strong party apparatus that is going to be here to win District 3, win District 4, win at the local level, and you are going to see a united front out of all of us to make sure that happens in 2018. Thank you.
Well said, very good. Oh, look, we have a lot of energy. This is a great party with wonderful values. We all know what we want, and we'll all support each other. These are tremendous candidates, and you're good Democrats. But we need to channel the energy that we've got. We need unity to do that. We've got to bring the entire party together, not just parts of it, but the entire party. My running mate, Brandon Scott, and I represent the breadth of the party. We're very different. He's a 33-year-old African-American Baltimore City Councilman, twice re-elected, chair of the Public Safety Committee. He's terrific. I wish he could be here today. But I'm a far end of the age spectrum, and I'm white, and I come from a law firm, which has got corporate tinges to it. Don't worry. Not that bad. But really, we need to unite that entire party. So we'll bring, whether it's in the general election, for our own campaign, or for any of these, very fine candidates, we're going to bring the full depth and unity of what we need. We need that energy and we need that unity, and I'm sure we're going to have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm proud to stand up here with this panel because we all know that any one of us would be better than Larry Hogan. And the truth is that the diversity of this panel is the diversity of our party. And it is why I am so proud to be a Democrat. But let's get into the nuts and bolts a little bit. Because we know that when we lost in 2014, it was because 296,000 Democrats didn't show up. And part of what has been so exciting, and it's a great question to ask here in Frederick, is we realized that when you swept this past November, it was because you amped up turnout in a way that I've never seen before. It was why I was so excited to do some Get Out the Vote. It was fun to run into Jana on that cold, warm winter morning. Because you realize that that blue wave is going to rise and it is going to lift all boats. And so what you've done here in Frederick, what we've seen in Annapolis, is what we can do across the state. And so when I get sort of the mantle of being called Donald Trump's worst nightmare, and I'd like to believe I'm also Larry Hogan's worst nightmare, I believe part of what we can do is make sure that we get out the 296,000 Democrats who didn't show up, but also the independents and Republicans who now feel, frankly, like they don't have a party. And so what we're going to do is recognize that the majority of those votes were women, minorities, immigrants, and younger voters 18 to 29. And so anytime I go to any of those constituencies, what I say is we know that any one of us would be better. And what I want to see is the sort of the united front that you're hearing, because right now the orthodoxy out there is that Larry Hogan isn't so bad. There's a reason why he's the second most popular Republican. And that's why I hope that while it is fantastic that every one of you came out, let's make sure that the next gathering, that every single seat is filled. Because the message that I think we know all too well isn't still resonating out there.
Thank you. And Mr. Ross.
Too often when I think about we Democrats, I think of that line that Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized party, I'm a Democrat. And when that proves true, we lose. And when we unify, we win. I mean, I remember when I was running tech policy for Obama's campaign, we fought like hell against Hillary's campaign. I mean, it got nasty, nasty. And it was really hard to repair that relationship, but we did. And we won in part because of it. And Hillary remembered the role that I played in it. So after I worked on the Economic Recovery Act, she called me and she goes, Alec, you know, you work me pretty good, will you come work for me now? And I remember what you did, extending a lead. That was great. That worked great for us in 2008. We screwed it up in Maryland in 2014, where we had a bitter primary that left over 3 people who weren't really talking much to each other and weren't going to work for each other. Happened again in 2016, where we had a really divided primary, and then we saw a lot of voters going to third parties, not voting. This question is in many respects one of the most important questions that's been asked today, because if we can unify, it is almost mathematically possible for us to lose if we can bring all of our Democrats together. And let me echo the comments that have been made up here by everybody else. Having gotten to know this field, I can honestly say I like and I respect each person sitting up here. We've got 93 days until the primary. All of us want to be your governor. All of us are going to compete ferociously for it. But at the end of it, you have to have the dignity and the humility to unify behind whomever of us is your nominee. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to closing statements. Candidates, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement. We will begin with Ms. Vignarajah.
You have a tough choice out there, because I realize that in many ways it's a crowded field. And the reality is that the orthodoxy is that no man can beat Larry Hogan. Well, my answer to that is I'm no man. And that matters. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, but the truth is that here at Hood College, knowing its origin, but also that I stand amongst fearless women like Jan, like Myrna, like Andrea. And you realize that what's going to matter this election is turnout and making sure that we give people a reason to believe that we can win. If you looked at elections across this country, what you saw is that when we beat incumbent Republicans, it was women leading the charge. And so in the state of Harriet Tubman and Barbara Mikulski, the fact that out of 14 federal and statewide offices, so 8 congressmen, 2 senators, the 4 statewide officials, the fact that we have no women in any of those 4 seats is mind-boggling. The fact that I'm the only woman running against 8 men is mind-boggling. And yet what's not so surprising is when you think about that lack of women in leadership, it explains why we come in 50th out of 50 when it comes to child care subsidies. It explains why we come in number 7th in terms of highest deaths due to breast cancer. It's why even as of about a month ago, we were still debating rapists having paternity rights in Maryland. That lack of leadership matters. But this is not just about representation, it's about politics. It's about how when you have women in office, you have better outcomes, better health care, better schools. It's why my lieutenant governor candidate is a woman in the first all women of color ticket in the nation. There were a lot of consultants out there that said, well, I don't know, can you really have 2 women of color on this ticket? I said, well, we've had 2 white males on a ticket, why not? And I say that because the truth is our party has calcified. And so if the Obamas taught me anything, it is that a new generation of leadership with a clear vision can change the world. My kind of goal is a little bit more or less ambitious than that. I just want to change Maryland. And so my point is that, look, if you are happy with the status quo, then I'm probably not your candidate. If you want to blow up the system, then I'm probably not your candidate. But if you believe that there is a moderate majority out there that is fiscally responsible and socially progressive, who wants to see the renaissance of Maryland finally within our lifetimes, then I hope you will take a look at my website and talk to me afterwards. It's www.krishformaryland.com. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Krish Vignarajah.
Thank you. All right, now Alec Ross.
Well, it's been an honor to be here today. Look, I grew up in the hills west of here, and because I couldn't get a good job out of college in the hills west of here, I became a public school teacher in Baltimore. I've been on a path that I feel really blessed to have been on since in education, in entrepreneurship, working for President Obama and Secretary Clinton. And the reason why I'm running is because, again, if there's one thing I've been convinced in 46 years of life, it's that the young people, it's that the folks that I grew up with in the whole country, and the 6th graders that I taught at Booker T. Washington Middle School on the west side of Baltimore, they have the same innate talent as the folks who I sat across the table from in the White House situation. Talent is everywhere. Talent is everywhere. Opportunity is not. That's something that we can change. I want to thank you for being a part of this today. When you listen to candidates running for office, a lot of it is, a lot of me. But the God's honest truth is that we can't retake our country until we retake our state. And our state isn't going to be retaken by any one person. It's going to be because of people like you filling up rooms like this one. It's not just what happens at the top of the ballot, it's what happens at the bottom of the ballot. It's everybody who's running for the school board, for the county council. It's all of you choosing to lean forward a little bit right now and retake our politics and retake our governance. My running mate, Julie Barati, and I are trying to bring some new faces and new ideas into the Democratic Party. She, like me, has executive branch experience. She's best known, she and her wife Emily own Denizens Brewing, a beer brewery in Silver Springs. But before that, she ran the Boots to Business program for returning combat veterans in the Obama administration. She ran women's entrepreneurship, and she helped establish the Affordable Care Act. What you have with Julie and I is this unusual combination of people who have a lot of executive branch experience. We've run big government programs, but we didn't come through the sort of Maryland, Annapolis political farm system. So we're experienced, but we're fresh faces that we think can animate and excite our voters a little bit. And speaking of beer, for any of you who I don't get to talk to afterwards, I'll be having a beer with your mayor at Attaboy Brewing after this. Come by, and any of your questions go unanswered. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kamenetz.
So why are we Democrats? I think we're Democrats because we believe that government's role is to improve the lives of people. But our values as Democrats are at risk right now with that man in the White House. He's a racist, sexist, pathological liar and bully whose tweets can lead us to nuclear war, and who actually thinks that depriving folks of affordable health care and giving tax cuts to the super rich are actually good ideas. In his first week in office, Donald Trump imposed his Muslim ban and began a campaign of terror against the immigrant community. The General Assembly tried to enact reasonable protections, and Larry Hogan opposed it, and it failed. I signed an executive order in Baltimore County last April that says that no county employee, including the police, can inquire as to someone's immigration status. It's why I didn't wait until DACA was in the news this year. Over a year ago, I wrote a letter to the president of the 5 colleges in Baltimore County telling them that our police officers will not enter their campuses for purposes of identifying DACA students. I didn't have to wait for Charlottesville to happen when I renamed 3 years ago Robert E. Lee Park in Baltimore County to Lake Roland, eliminating the symbol of hate. And it's why 6 years ago, I passed a bill in Baltimore County protecting the rights of transgender individuals. These are our values as Democrats, and we need leaders who have the experience in protecting those values. We're parents, okay? I was so proud of my 16-year-old when he marched to protest gun violence. I mean, my older sibling marched against a war in Vietnam. These kids are marching against a war in this country, against ridiculous laws on gun safety that aren't promoting gun safety. We need an experienced leader who's going to fight for our future here in Maryland. Someone who's going to fully fund education, and that means making sure that casino money is used to supplement funding and not supplant it. We need someone who's going to eliminate the disparities in education between the haves and the have-nots. We need to bring universal pre-K to stop the achievement gap before it starts. But we also need to make college more affordable, but job skill training more accessible. Reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, and have a state again that we can be proud of. I'm going to stand up for these values, and I'm going to be your next governor with your help. Thank you.
Mr. Jealous?
Well, thank you. Start by saying thank you for marching yesterday. And thank you for sitting through this forum today. Getting our state back to moving forward again is going to take all of us coming together, taking a little risk, and doing the hard work. I'm proud to be the only person running for governor, not just in Maryland, I think in the country, who's already been arrested outside of Trump's White House. I was there to defend our dreamers. Maryland Dreamer had been found dead in a trailer truck in a Walmart parking lot in Texas a couple weeks before that, trying to get back to his family here. Dreamers called and they said, Mr. Jealous, you chaired our campaign. Would you please go to jail for us because we're afraid to go now? And I said, okay. Oops. I was also there because I come from a family that repeatedly has taken risks to advance our country. For my dad's family, he descends from 7 Revolutionary War soldiers. My mom descends from 2 black Reconstruction statesmen. They met as teachers in Baltimore and as civil rights workers. My dad was one of the few white guys to go to jail repeatedly in downtown Baltimore to desegregate the lunch counters. My mom had sued Western High School for girls when she was 12. She was desegregated when she was 12. And I was there because I'm a Democrat. And I understand what we've long understood, but we lost our way recently. We cozied up to Wall Street for the last quarter century or so. That when we lift from the bottom, when we lift all of us, we all do better. See, I was inspired to become a Democrat because I learned of men who we remember by 3 initials, transformative women like Barbara Mikulski and Shirley Chisholm. And when we are the party of RFK and MLK and FDR, when we remember, in other words, there's only one way to build this economy, and it's from the bottom up, and then when we all come together, we all do better, well, there's no beating us. I've said today, everything at the core of my campaign is about making sure that we expand opportunity for all of us. Our young people's hope is dying faster than we want to admit. And if you doubt it, look at the opioid stats. Look at them fighting yesterday to get guns out of the hands of their classmates. And to make sure we finally have a complete assault weapons ban. It's way too easy to buy an AR-15. And if anybody tells you they need it for deer hunting, they don't know how to hunt deer. And look at the violence. The neighbor of my mom grew up in Baltimore. And what I know is this. If we make sure everybody in Maryland has health care, the economy here will grow. If we make college more affordable, the economy in Western Maryland will grow, and it will grow in West Baltimore too. And I'm proud of our campaign. We are building a truly statewide campaign, and I invite you to join us. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you. And Mr. Madaleno?
First, thank you, Hannah, for doing a wonderful job moderating. Thank you all very much for coming out and spending a Sunday afternoon with us. I think it's a strong sign of how well we're going to do in November. You know, one of the reasons why Frederick County has gone from being one of the Republican counties to one of the Democratic counties is you've had the good sense to elect great leaders to move us forward. Jan Gardner, as county executive, Jan wasn't an outsider when she was elected. She wasn't someone who hadn't had prior experience. She was a former county commissioner. She knew what job she was walking into when she was elected county executive. Michael O'Connor, your new mayor in the city of Frederick, same thing. He was the city legislator who then went for mayor. That's what I'm doing. Yes, you might say I'm part of the Annapolis farm team because I spent 16 years in office. I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of working on issues for people from around the state, on education, on healthcare, on the environment, on civil rights. I'm the person who is ready to hit the job, the ground running, because I have unparalleled experience in this race at this level of government. You have to submit a budget 3 days after you're sworn in. It's helpful to have someone who's actually worked on the budget year in and year out for years to understand where that money's going and how it can be best invested. I've been here year in and year out working to elect Democrats, voting in primary and general election. I can't believe we are sitting in a Frederick County that once elected Alex Mooney, who picked Alex Mooney over Sue Hecht. And now we are talking about making sure we win Frederick County in 2018. I was in the Senate when Ron Young gave the most memorable speech when voting for marriage equality. Ron stood up and said, if I lose my next election over this, so be it, because it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Ron, for doing this, for standing up for my family. And what happened when he did the right thing? He won an even bigger re-election. When I was first elected in 2002, when I ran in 2002, I was told to stay in the closet. I was the first openly gay person elected to the Maryland General Assembly. Talk about an establishment person. This is what's so great about Maryland. Not that long ago, 16 years ago, I was told I had no chance to have a political future. Now, 16 years later, I'm running for governor. I have a serious shot at it, and some of my competitors suggest that I'm too much of an establishment person. Well, I think that is great in Maryland, that I can go from sit down, you outsider, to God, you're just part of the establishment. That's what makes Maryland so great. We have the most powerful governor in the country. Our Constitution.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to earning your vote. Thank you again, Hannah.
Thank you all for having me here today. And thank you all, Frederick County. We're a great party. The Democratic Party is a great party, and it's a great party in the state. Think of our leaders, Paul Sarbanes, Barbara Mikulski, Perrin Mitchell. We could go on and on. But the party has gotten complacent. We lost in 2014. People say that Larry Hogan's doing a fine job, 65 or 70%. We have a difficult election ahead of us. We're a great party, but we lost the White House to Donald Trump. The party needs energy and it needs unity. That's what I'm saying, and that's what Brandon and I will bring. There are two issues for Democrats to decide this year. One is to get somebody in office who can get things done, and second, to get somebody nominated who can beat Larry Hogan. And I would suggest to you that Brandon Scott and I can do that. We can do it because we'll take Larry Hogan on his own turf, and we'll beat him. Take the issues. Public education. Larry Hogan's signature move in education was to move the start date till after Labor Day, depriving the local jurisdictions of their prerogatives and imposing bad educational policy. Compare that to our 21-page comprehensive education plan. In the area of transportation, Larry Hogan widens highways. He widened 404 so Marylanders could leave Maryland and go to Delaware to the beach. Compare that to our comprehensive statewide transportation plan that's online. Statewide transportation plan that includes mass transit that is more attractive than cars. Third, economic development. Under Larry Hogan, Maryland has created jobs, to be sure, because President Obama and the Democratic Party saved us from the George Bush recession and created a vibrant national economy. Maryland is behind the rest of the nation on average in creating jobs and well behind in wages. Compare that to our economic development plan that is comprehensive and focuses on increasing more good middle-class jobs. Public safety and public health. During Larry Hogan's governorship, over 300 people have been murdered in Baltimore. And every year of his governorship, we've had an increase in deaths in opioid overdoses. Compare that to Brandon Scott's comprehensive public safety plan, which we're incorporating with our own and will publish shortly. We need to stay awake, stay energized, and win this election in November.
Thank you. If I can have your attention for a few more seconds, I would like to close this forum by thanking all of the candidates for their time and participation and to share their vision for Maryland. Thank you, voters in the room and watching virtually. With your engagement, elected officials remain accountable to their commitment to public service. This is an opportunity for us to redefine the meaning of working together to create an equitable, sustainable, and empowered Maryland. Support your favorite candidate until June 26th and unite behind the victor to defeat Hogan on November 6th. If each of you could, in the audience, could please take a moment to complete your post-forum ballot. Okay. And be sure to turn your ballots in at the doors We're going to be having our meet and greet in the upper gallery of this room, and if you'd like to ask some questions of the candidates or speak to them further about any issues, you can talk to them up there. Just find their table. Thank you all again for coming, and thank you to our candidates.